Hey guys, this is Kyle at Projection Hub, and today we're going to be talking about how to write a business plan for a two-sided marketplace or a marketplace business. So you may think about this of any business that's going to have a seller side and a buyer side, and your business is providing that platform in the center, right? You're going to bring the buyers and the sellers together to help facilitate those transactions, and that's where your business is born. And so typically or historically, two-sided marketplaces are fairly complex businesses. Think Uber, think Airbnb. They can be really large, they can be really costly, they can be tech intensive, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And actually the example we're going to talk about in this business plan is a little bit more of a local online marketplace to give you some context. So what are we going to do today? I'm going to be taking you through this free business plan template for two-sided marketplace. You can grab it, the link in the description below. And we're going to be looking at this from the perspective of how to create a business plan. Maybe if you're trying to get financing, I think it's probably more common for a marketplace to maybe try to bootstrap and then get to a point where you raise investment, which you would still need a business plan. But we're going to be going through those details, and I'm going to be covering the 5 key points that I think make a business plan more lendable and get it more prepared for financing. Even if your goal isn't necessarily to get financing, I still think this is going to be a helpful guide for you. So first of all, who's Projection Hub? We've helped more than 50,000 startups and small businesses create financial projections for their business plans, for their loan applications, for their pitch decks, for their acquisitions, you name it. And several of those have been two-sided marketplaces. And who am I? Actually, my time before Projection Hub, so I've been here for a little over 2 years now, but my time before Projection Hub, I was an SBA lender for about 7 years. And so I had the chance to review lots of business plans, work with lots of businesses to help them prepare loan applications, review their loan applications, review their projections for their loan requests. And if at any point you find the content of this video helpful, give us a thumbs up. That's really helpful for us as a fellow small business. You can choose to subscribe to the channel as well, and all of our content is around marketplace businesses, but just many businesses and business management in general. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into the details here. Okay, so first, why is a business plan necessary? Which you probably know the answer to that. Maybe it's a silly question, but in most cases, the purpose of the business plan isn't to educate the audience on what your industry does. Now, two-sided marketplaces in general, although many people have used them, have participated in them, maybe are like a little less familiar with what the actual business model looks like and the structure looks like. Your lender, or especially an investor, would be understanding and would understand what a marketplace does. So you don't need to spend precious real estate in your business plan explaining the marketplace. What we want to do is make sure that this gives a definitive roadmap to how we're going to be successful. That's really the goal of your business plan, is you want to instill as much confidence as possible for your lender, for your investor, that, wow, yeah, actually, if they do these steps, I do think that they're going to be successful. And that's what we want to do. If we just say, someday we're going to be X big, right, and we don't demonstrate how we're going to get there, that is a little bit hard for, I think, a funder or potential funder to get there and connect those dots. So that's really the goal that we want to achieve in our business plan. So starting to go through this, and I'm not going to write the business plan in front of you. This is filled out with a fictitious example, a generic example. I'm just going to go through quickly through this business plan. And when I come to those 5 key points, I'll stop and talk a little bit more, maybe even show an example. But again, you can grab this for free down the description below. So first off, I want to point out just our table of contents here. And you'll notice that it's not really long, okay? So a common misconception is that your business plan needs to be super long for it to be good. And that's just not the case. And I actually would take the opposite side of that. I think that the longer your business plan is, it probably hurts it more in the long run. Now, if you need to create a 50-page business plan, a 100-page business plan to do all your homework and feel like you've got all of your concepts down and you understand your business better, definitely do that as an exercise. But what you deliver to your lender or an investor needs to be a refined version of that. There's a reason, especially for investable types of businesses and marketplaces would fit in that pitch decks are popular, is because it really condenses the presentation and makes it a shorter, more digestible format. And so a business plan, I would say you want more detail than in a pitch deck, but I guess using that as your frame of reference, we want to keep it shorter, because the longer it is, the more the important details are getting spread out and they're getting lost. The longer your business plan gets, the person who's reading it is probably gonna be skimming it more. So we want it to be shorter and jam-packed with all important details. And I tend to think the 20 pages is probably pretty sufficient. So in this example, obviously you got to take into consideration we have some descriptive stuff in here. In many of these sections, you'll want to include more detail than what this template is going to have pre-filled in, but it does show you the sections that should be included. So let's go ahead and just keep going through here. I want you to think about the executive summary as like the cover letter to your resume for a job application. So here's where you're getting your quick one-page summary of the important details. Just highlighting a couple quick things. When you're including your goals, I would tend to include some specifics maybe. Your long-term goal may not need to have specifics, but your short-term. So in this case, it just says establish Market Mate, which is the name of our fictitious business, as Indianapolis's premier platform for handmade artisan goods. What is premier platform, right? That's not specific enough. This should have more detail in it of saying we hope to have 1,000 users by the end of the first 12 months or something like that. It should be a little bit more specific than that. One thing that this executive summary doesn't have that you could include is a quick snapshot of the financial details. So maybe that's your target fundraising amount, your startup costs, your estimated break-even point, something along those lines. You could include that. Okay, moving along here to our company description. Okay, so this is an extension of the executive summary, but just a little bit more detail around the founder story, who the founders are. I think it's key point number 3. We'll talk about a little bit later in the business plan, but this is a section where technically you could include it, just talking about the founders a little bit more. Legal structure, unique selling proposition. I would only include this if it's actually an attainable unique selling proposition. If it's really generic, like we're going to change the world, then like you're better off not including it. But yeah, so include this. It's not going to be groundbreaking, but probably still good to have included. Okay, now we're getting into the meat of things here. The market analysis. Okay, so here you see what we're talking about. We're just going to give a general industry overview, talk about our competitors, our target market, opportunity in the market. So important things here. What I don't want you to do when it comes to talking about your industry is don't do the Shark Tank approach. And this can be easy to do when it comes to something like a marketplace business, because technically your customers could be a lot all over the place depending upon how big you want to scale. But don't come in and say like the market is $2.7 trillion. And if we capture just 1% of that, like that's not attainable. So really hone in on the specific actual attainable market if you're going to try and demonstrate how large it is. But this is going to bring us to key point number 1 on how we make this section even better than a typical business plan. And that is to provide specific examples of local market research to demonstrate. So we want to demonstrate there's actually room in the market for the business. So most business plans would just have this, right? But that's not going to do enough because it's not really demonstrating how do you actually know that there's room in the market. And it's probably impossible to fully know that there's room in the marketplace. There's going to be some speculation in there that's going to be natural. But anything we can show to back that up with data is bonus points for someone that's about to put some money on what you're doing. So let's look at some of the examples we have in here. So one, engagement with social media platforms. And this I think is more like doing some research into trending hashtags, things like that, to see if there's some positive growth in the subject matter and maybe the location of artisan fairs and local crafts, handmade goods. I think that number 2 in this example is pretty good. And that would be going to local art fairs and things that would be a place where, because one thing to keep in mind that's tricky about marketplaces is we have to appeal and attract sellers and buyers. So we have to attract both sides of the business. We're not just appealing to one. We need to make sure that our business is going to we only succeed if we attract both sides. If we only attract one side, then we're going to have to pivot our business and do something else, because we need to make sure we're creating the space for that transaction to happen. And so I think this is actually a pretty good idea. And that would be to go to the fairs that your target audience would be and survey them. You could just ask what their shopping preferences are. If there was a marketplace, an online marketplace specifically for local goods, like would they want to participate in that as a buyer or as a seller, and collect that data. And this will blend into key point 2 nicely when I get there. But something I like to demonstrate typically is key point number 3, and that's to do some online search trend analysis. It's a little bit trickier with this example, but I'm still going to show you because it's a free way. It's a free tool to do that. And so what I like to do is I like to go to a free tool. This is if you create a free Google AdWords account, so what the account you would use to actually run Google Ads, they have a tool called the Keyword Planner tool. And so really what it allows you to do is like simulate Google search phrases. So in any given location, how often are things being searched? And some trend data around that. So the reason why this is tricky for this example is because a lot of marketplace businesses are national, right? Or maybe even global. So you're looking at a bigger audience to maybe try to analyze that. When I'm talking just Indianapolis, how often are people searching for these things? It's not surprising that there's not a ton of search data, okay? But we'll still look at the search data that we have. I tried to be thoughtful about what a target seller or what buyer might be searching for. And some of the results, at least from what I found, aren't great, to be honest with you, okay? I thought maybe our target audience would be searching for Etsy sometimes, right? Or Penrod Arts Fair. That's just a local arts fair every year. You can see there is some search data, but the year-over-year change is what I'm most interested in, right? Is there a growth in searches related to my industry? And if there was, that would indicate to me like a demand. There's a growing demand. But honestly, in a lot of these cases, we're seeing a decrease. Now, I'm not going to tell you like if you did this exercise and that was the case for you, that doesn't mean you need to put the stop on your business. It just means I think you need to pivot how you're going to talk about it, or maybe where you're going to find the evidence to help support that. And this is typically an example that I would demonstrate, but again, in this specific example, it's not great, admittedly, but I do think using something like example 2, where it's like you're going to those fairs, collecting surveys, like that's great data, right? And if you can include that in your business plan, we responses from 175 sellers and 100 potential buyers, and they all said they would love to have an online platform to be able to whatever. That's really great to include. And to roll that into your marketing and sales strategy, so that was key point number 1, demonstrating actual data around your market, that it exists and that there's room for you. Number 2 is a marketing and sales strategy, okay? So we just talked about demonstrating what the market is. Now we need to talk about how we're actually going to acquire that customers from that market, okay? And so you can see the basic things that should be included in here. Details about what our actual platform looks like, the service we're providing, pricing for that, like how are we gonna make money from the thing that we're doing? We're gonna distribute content, promotions, advertising, we're gonna have a website, etc. All the things here are kind of minimum requirement, but what is gonna make it shine, key point number 2 would be, again, demonstrating customer acquisition. And so we want to provide specific examples or ideas of how we're actually going to get people in the virtual door, okay? And so let's talk about a couple of these that I think are good. Piggybacking off of the other example we talked about, going to the actual fairs, that's a great example of market demonstration, but also customer acquisition, right? If we're meeting people that we think would be ideal buyers and sellers, and we're asking them if there would be a platform, and they're saying yes, it's not that much more difficult to ask them, like, we're thinking about making one. If we do launch it, do we have permission to have you on a notification list or something like that? And they're like, yeah, we would love that. Okay, right there, that's already, you've done twofold. You're demonstrating the market and you have some prospective people, okay? So another way you could think about this is traction. That's a tech-related word, but we want to demonstrate that the business has some momentum before it launches, that we have some traction, so that when it comes time for it to open, there's actually people, there's already business happening, things are working. It's not like we're gonna wait until we open and we have our funding and then we'll actually try to start to grow the business. So the 2 best examples of traction are gonna be pre-launch revenue, so you're actually making money before you even officially launch the business. And 2 is interest, so signups and having people ready to participate in your business. And so my favorite example for customer acquisition right here is starting small and on the side. So something lenders loved, I loved as a lender, is when the applicant had already started as like doing this on the side or a side gig, and they'd maybe grown some things to the point where they were ready to go on full time or to expand what they were doing and growing it, because that demonstrates a lot of hustle, it demonstrates some experience, and they're not starting from zero. And so one idea was to start small on the side and start brokering items for sellers via eBay and Facebook Marketplace, and then keep a percentage of the sale as part of that transaction, and then start building a list of people you are selling stuff for. You can also ask buyers if they'd be interested in joining a platform dedicated to that type of stuff in the area. That would not be on Facebook Marketplace or eBay. And so that could be a great way to do it, right? Start meeting some people and saying like, hey, I know you're getting rid of these things. I could help you sell some of these things, and we could split what I make from that. And or you're an artist or something like that, I'd love to help you sell some of your stuff. Can I put together listings for you on eBay or Facebook Marketplace? And then we share profits from that. So that would be an awesome way to start. You could come to your lender and say, I've brokered 130 successful sales for $7,000 over the last 12 months and I want to have a platform and I've got a list of all these sellers. Like that is so great for a lender to hear that versus it's not just an idea in your head, but you're actually putting it into practice. That would be killer for a business plan. Okay, moving along. Operations and management. So now we're getting into a little bit more of the logistics. I alluded to this section up at the top when I listed the founder story. And so here you're going to talk about how the business is actually going to operate, the team, technology, outline those details a little bit. But what I think is the most important aspect of this section, the key takeaway is you want to make sure your lender or investor feels confident that you and your team know what you're doing and know what you're getting yourself into. And so relevant industry experience is how that's framed a lot of times. And so you need to talk about the strengths and the experience of you and your team. Now, in this section, oftentimes, like when I was a lender, we would have someone apply for a loan to open up a business doing one thing that's very different from their career experience, right? So maybe they were a corporate executive or a marketing person and they wanted to open a donut shop, or something like that. Not to say they can't do that, and maybe a person has a hobby and they want to turn that into a business, but you still need to be able to demonstrate that you have the experience to do it beyond just being interested in it. And so say that's you in that example, highlight the strengths that are transferable. So let's use the marketing example again for our marketplace example here. Say you're really good at advertising and sales and building a website and graphic design, like all of these things that would be important and helpful for the business, or maybe you managed people before, right? That would be an important thing to include. But maybe what you're missing out on is software development, like some key things that would be required to make a platform like this work. You need to fill that gap with your team. So if that's a partner, a key employee, a co-founder, you want to make sure that your relevant industry experience is well-rounded and that the lender or the investor is going to have confidence that the team is equipped and ready to actually be successful. So you really want to hit on that. Make sure you have the right people in the right seats and to get that confidence. Okay, moving on to the big one here, financial projections. Now this is the most important part of the business plan. Obviously we're a little biased as us being Projection Hub, but this, even as a lender, this is where we spent the most time was reviewing the projections for a startup. So here you can say we've included a breakdown of the startup funds. So a little over $2 million, you're building a tech business or whatever. It can be expensive or cost intensive, certainly cheaper ways to do it. This is just an example. So we've got a breakdown of our startup costs. We've got just a kind of an overview of our income, our revenue projections. So this is highlights though, high level numbers for revenue, cost of goods sold, gross profit, operating expenses, net income, and ultimate profitability. And then we have some platform specific, let's see if I can zoom in just a little bit here. Details like number of sellers, number of buyers we estimate for the first 5 years, total units sold, etc. We've got some key ratios. We've got expense projections here. So this would be like your overhead, your recurring monthly expenses. And then we've got a 5-year pro forma statement for your income statement or your profit and loss, cash flow projections, balance sheet, and then we've got a break-even analysis here and sales growth. And so this is oftentimes the section where founders start to get really overwhelmed, but it's very important to do that. And full transparency, those charts and those financial statements were made using this template. So this is our template specifically for two-sided marketplaces. It's built by a CPA on our staff. It's been used by hundreds of businesses. And it's really easy to do. So I'm just going to show it to you really quick. This isn't, you don't have to do it this way, but you have to have projections, right? So you likely don't have the skill set to create them from scratch. I certainly don't. So that leaves you with options like you're going to pay an accountant to do it, which you're welcome to do that. You could pay our team to make your projections if you wanted to, but it's going to be expensive, right? You're looking at thousands of dollars to have a CPA create projections from scratch. Now, I think that this template is far superior than many that I've seen, and I'm going to show you why, but you're only inputting numbers into these blue tabs, okay? And so we're only editing these blue boxes on these pages. So it's not a ton of information we have to put in. Important details like investors, what are large purchases we need to make, loans, right? Okay, so then the big daddy here is input revenue. So what makes this template unique and special is a lot of projection templates just ask you, what's your estimated revenue, right? And then it's going to build your financial statements for you. But a lot of people need help figuring out what their estimated revenue is going to be. And so this tab here is going to actually help you calculate your estimated revenue using the details or what are called assumptions that you understand about your business, okay? So here it's going to step you through, okay, on the seller side of the business, how much are you going to spend on advertising to try and attract sellers, okay? Cost per click, some different advertising data there, but essentially how many leads are we going to end up getting? How many sellers are we going to end up getting? Conversion rate. How many of those sellers do we estimate are going to leave each month? We're going to do something similar on the buyer side. Then we're going to actually talk about transactions and revenue per transaction size. Are we going to have subscriptions? Buyer side subscription, right? Okay, so this looks overwhelming, but again, we're only touching these blue boxes. Then we're going to talk about our monthly overhead operating expenses. And then ultimately, if we have salaried employees, we're going to add them here. And it's going to generate all of the data your lender or investors need. And you're also going to get a monthly breakdown of those as well. You get like a dashboard here for investors too. So a lot of information. I'll link that down in the description below. You can grab it. And if you stick with me to the end of the video, I'll even give you a promo code if you want to get a discount off that. It's already a pretty cheap template. But key point number 4 isn't to have projections. You have to have projections in your business plan. There's a minimum requirement. Key point number 4 is that they need to be realistic financial projections. Now you may be asking like, well, how do I know if they're going to be realistic? And that is a good question. And it's a relatively easy answer. And that is to just search for benchmark data, whether that's Google or even just using a tool like ChatGPT or Bard, and just asking like, what are key financial statistics? Now, a marketplace business can be tricky because it can exist in different industries, even though the business model is pretty similar. But let's just take a look at an example here, right? So let's say ChatGPT thinks that gross profit can range from 30 to 80%. Okay, that's a really big range. Let's talk about net profit, 5 to 20%. Okay, that's a little bit more realistic. Even here's just a general Google search for profit margin, 10 to 20%. Okay, 5% considered low. So let's go check out what our estimated profit margin is going to be. Okay, so first year, even second year in a business like this is going to not look great, right? It's a very cash intensive business, a lot of scale up, but the growth potential is large. So let's look as things start to settle in. Finally, we break even in our third year, and then it's looking like we're in the 20% to 30% range, which I think is realistic, okay? You can do that exercise with any data point in your projections, right? You can start to tweak them, but you're just looking for benchmarks to make sure you're not copying and pasting someone else's work, but you want to make sure when you pitch this that your lender or investor aren't going to be like, you have no idea what you're talking about, because that number is super unrealistic. And so doing this process can help you to be able to reel those numbers in and be able to defend them because you know where they come from. Okay, again, that you can get that template. And I think I failed to mention, we have a video guide that walks you through it. So if you get it, you can watch through this video, show you how to fill it out. We have free customer support. So if you're filling it out and you have questions, we'll be here to help you as well. And then the last key point, this is more particularly if you're going to get a loan, but that is to demonstrate what's called skin in the game, or be prepared to talk about skin in the game. When business owners get a loan, when I was a lender, they would come to me and oftentimes would say that they had received the advice to keep their business and their personal separate. So they only wanted the loan to be in the business name. That would be really great if that was possible. That's great advice when it comes to bookkeeping, bank accounts, keeping the finances separate. But when it comes to getting a loan, you're not going to avoid being involved personally in that, right? You're going to have to personally guarantee that loan, especially if it's an SBA loan. And you're also going to have to make some sacrifices, right? So that might be a cash investment, right? A lender is not going to give you 100% of the startup costs. They're going to give you a percentage of that, maybe 80%. And you're going to have to come up with the other 20%. It's because you have some mutual risk there. They're going to want to see collateral, right? A marketplace business isn't going to have collateral because it's very tech-based. And so you're probably going to need like a second mortgage on a property or a cosigner or something like that. So I'm just saying this to prepare you when it comes to the conversation with a lender. You need to know what you're willing to risk. And if that's not enough to make them comfortable, then you have to be okay with that outcome. So again, a marketplace business is probably geared a lot more towards investment. That's a different conversation. But if you are interested in securing some financing, it's just something you need to be prepared to talk about. Now, you don't have to come into your lender and say, okay, I'm prepared to give you my house and all of these things. You don't have to do that. Just be prepared to have that conversation on what they're going to ask from that. So there you have it. That is how to create a business plan for a market side or a marketplace business or multi-sided marketplace. Let me grab you that promo code I promised you. Use PH20BP. That'll get you 20% off that template. The template's already less than $100. It's a bargain for sure. And let us know if you have any questions. Reach out at support@projectionhub.com. We'd be happy to help you. Give us a thumbs up, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks.